Now, Michael, tell us about the conditions in this notorious Iranian prison, Evin, where the Australians are being held.
Well, Shari, it's definitely not a pleasant place. It's been in operation since at least the 70s, originally under the US-backed Shah, and obviously since the revolution in 79, it's been run by the theocratic regime in Iran. Now, it's one of its most notorious torture prisons. It's the centre where they hold many of their political prisoners. It's where people are held in appalling conditions, often in solitary confinement during the periods of their rather brutal interrogations. It's been highlighted as a centre of rape being used as a form of intimidation, and it's also where many of the Iranian executions take place. It's not an easy place to be.
And the safety of foreigners when they're thrown into these prisons, what are their chances that they're going to get through their time here, or all of the Australians and the other foreigners, without being harmed?
Well, obviously that's a difficult question. A prison is a prison, and I'd be very confident that both of these most recent Aussies would have been interrogated at quite some length. But as to whether they'd be harmed, at the end of the day, it still remains very firmly in the Iranian regime's interests to make sure that these Australian prisoners do remain in some relatively fair condition. They're obviously using the plight of these Westerners to try to gain concessions in the great geopolitical game. And so they really need to ensure that these prisoners, that can be regarded as valuable assets in negotiations, are kept in reasonably good health.
So what is Iran's endgame here? Are they looking to, because there's been a suggestion that it's not just the geopolitical situation, as you put it, but also a suggestion that they might want to exchange hostages as well?
Well, yes, clearly that is part of the geopolitical situation. Indeed, until a couple of months ago, Australia was holding an Iranian female spy in an Adelaide prison, I believe for almost 2 years. I understand she gave birth in the Australian prison. Now, earlier this year, the Iranian foreign minister at a speech at the Asia Society specifically offered a prisoner swap and named the woman being held in the Australian jail as one of the targets for the swap. Now, that woman was extradited to the United States in August, and she's now pleaded guilty to illegally shifting restricted technologies out of the United States and into Iran. Now, there would have been an excellent prospect for an exchange there. So really what it comes down to now is, what does the Iranian regime think that they're going to be able to extract out of Australia or our bigger allies in return for the release of these prisoners? It all comes down to what the bargain is going to be.
And in your view, is the Australian government going to proceed by allowing the justice system in Tehran to play out first?
Well, justice system is a bit of an irony there in Tehran. I mean, I've passed through those courts, and they dealt with me fairly reasonably, but that wasn't at a period of such heated international friction with Iran. Now, look, the third Australian, the British Australian woman who teaches at Melbourne University, she was rolled up at the end of last year. She went to court, as most of these foreigners do, in secret. Generally, their access to lawyers is virtually non-existent. And by and large, the families and their home countries don't learn that they've even been to trial, let alone convicted and sentenced, until quite some time afterwards. And that was the case with the woman from Melbourne University. She was sentenced to 10 years for espionage. Now, that's a charge that they throw around quite a lot. I mean, this is not a new tactic by the Iranians. This is part and parcel of the way they've been doing business over the last few decades. They're very good and they're very adept at this prisoner
It's not just the Iranians, of course, keeping this situation secret. Our government has known that the travel bloggers, for example, were imprisoned some 10 weeks ago, 2.5 months ago, but chose to keep it secret, as is their practice. Do you think their decision to keep it secret is the right one?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. I've been involved in many hostage negotiations, some with Iranian-backed militia, sometimes with the Islamic State and other insurgent groups, the Taliban. The first rule of thumb is that you try not to highlight the plight and the predicament of the prisoner, because you can't control the narrative, and you don't necessarily want to shine light on a problem before you can seek to address it. I mean, most of these exchanges and most of these releases are obtained in secret through, back-channel communications. That's certainly been my experience. Now, in some cases, there may be cause to go public, but that also is a double-edged sword, because it's not going to put pressure on the Iranian government. So all you can hope is that it spurs the Australian government on further to continue trying to secure their release and hopefully impact on international partners who actually have influence over Iran, unlike us. Yet at the same time, the more publicity and the more popularity a cause can attract can also mean that the prisoner's value as an asset also increases. So it can very much complicate their desire to release a prisoner, because they can extract a higher and higher price. So no, it's absolutely the right thing for the government to have been attempting to negotiate their release and to try and provide them consular help without making a noise about it.